Making the case for Catholic patriotism has been a rather tough sell. Catholics seem to be seriously divided over the matter, each and every one with a well-prepared litany of reasons for their position. My recent blog entry at the Distributist Review is an excellent case in point. While there were no Hannitized Catholics praising America as the greatest thing since the introduction of fire, there were plenty who insisted that my arguments failed to take into consideration the enmity between Catholicism and America's civil religion. My fear, though, is that these individuals missed the point, and they did so almost entirely. The point under consideration was not so much whether or not there is antagonism between Catholicism and America's civil religion, for there most certainly is. In fact, as much should be granted from the get-go. What was at issue, though, was how Catholic citizens ought to live, how they ought to move, and how they ought to have their being, both as Catholics and as American citizens. It seems that people all too often miss the mark when considering this matter. I said as much in my blog, and I have no reservations about insisting as much again here. But let me explain what I mean. On the one hand, you have those Catholics who lionize America, her founding fathers, her founding documents, and even the role America ought to play in world affairs. America is often treated as a kind of second Israel. The founding fathers are often regarded as these orthodox champions of truth and justice. America's founding documents are often considered to be God-breathed and a rule for all people at all times and in all places. On the other hand, there are those who harbor what I believe to be an unnecessary dislike for all things American. This position fails to distinguish between the good, the bad, and the ugly, and it results in a habitual tossing out of the baby with the bathwater. These individuals may point rightly to the influence of Freemasonry on the American system, and they're very accurate in their critique of rampant materialism, naturalism, and secular humanism. What they fail to see, though, is everything in between, and that is saying an awful lot. But what I think both sides fail to realize is that the issue of Catholic patriotism is rooted, at least first and foremost, in the origin of civil authority. The Church has not been silent on the matter of civil authority, its origin, and how both rulers and subjects ought to act in accordance with such truths. Pope Leo XIII deals specifically with the origin of civil authority in his 1881 encyclical, De Eternum. Now remember, this was written long after the American system had taken shape and well after the infiltration of Enlightenment principles into social constructs. The Pope wrote in the thick of it all, and his wisdom is as applicable today as it was in 1881. The Pope begins by arguing that civil authority and order are matters of necessity, both of them flowing from God, in whom all authority and power is rightly vested. He argues in paragraph 11 that society is meant to govern the wills of individuals in such a way as to make, as it were, one will out of many, and to impel them rightly and orderly to the common good. For this reason, and for many other reasons, the Pope says in paragraph 13 that they who refuse honor to rulers refuse it to God Himself. But does this require Catholics to embrace and champion those things admittedly at odds with their faith? Not at all. In paragraph 15, the Pope gives what he calls the one only reason which men have for not obeying. This reason being anything demanded of citizens which is openly repugnant to the natural or the divine law. The real issue of Catholic patriotism, then, is whether or not patriotism requires embracing those things openly repugnant to the faith. For many, this would definitely be the case. There is no lack of people insisting that patriotism requires American Catholics to embrace those principles at odds with the Catholic faith. But the Church has never understood patriotism in this way. In fact, quite the opposite. As Pope Leo XIII would say in his encyclical on Christian citizenship, acting in such a manner would be anything but patriotic. In paragraph 10 of that particular encyclical, he goes so far as to say that thinking or acting in such a manner would be a crime combined with a misdemeanor against the state, inasmuch as every offense leveled against religion is also a sin against the state. So what does genuine Catholic patriotism require of us? For an answer, one needs look no further than Pope Leo XIII's encyclical on Christian citizenship. Paragraph 5 teaches us to love devotedly our country of birth, It's our native land where we were brought up, from whence we have received the means of enjoyment this mortal life affords. Paragraph 9 requires Catholics to see the likeness and symbol of divine majesty in public authority, even when it is exercised by one unworthily, being always conscious of our duty to honor and obey prelates. According to paragraph 10, we are to give honor to public authorities, always being willing to make sure the obedience due to rulers and legislators is not refused, except for those instances where there is a deviation from their will in those precepts only which civil authorities have no power to enjoin. Paragraph 11 assures us that such an approach to patriotism leads to a love for both countries, that of earth below and heaven above, yet in such a way that our love of heaven surpasses even that of our earthly home. Doing as much has the happy result, as promised in paragraph 36, that whatever pressure of events we may endure, we will be deficient in nothing, because we are relying on the wisdom of that most excellent rule of moderation. This is Catholic patriotism in a nutshell. Here we have the origin of civil authority, we have the rights and responsibilities of rulers and subjects, and we have the mode of operation for those instances where very real tensions occur. Honor where honor is due, even in the midst of controversy, especially in the midst of controversy. American Catholics have it rough, there's no doubt about that. But we aren't without a guide, and we aren't alone. The difficulties faced by American Catholics in an effort to be both good Catholics and good Americans isn't really all that different from what is the case for people all around the world. But the Church has, in her wisdom, told us how we ought to live, how we ought to move, and how we ought to have our being. Putting aside our enthusiasm might be tough, and it certainly won't result in a swift resolve to the difficulties we have to face. But that, my friends, isn't really the point. The real point is doing what we can and what we must, both as Catholics and as citizens, that everything would be done in order, with honor, and with the confidence that in doing so, we will be able to endure the pressures of modern American life as good Catholics and the very best Americans.